Marcus Johnson lived a quiet life in the small town of Oak Ridge. He was not wealthy, nor was he famous, but he had something many people admired, a heart full of kindness and a strong sense of responsibility. Marcus worked as a mechanic at a local garage, fixing cars day in and day out. His hands were often greasy, but his smile never faded. Despite long hours at work, Marcus always made time for his family, his wife, Sarah, and their 2 young children. Life wasn't perfect, but it was good enough. What most people didn't know about Marcus was that deep down he dreamed of becoming a lawyer. As a teenager, he used to watch courtroom dramas on TV, fascinated by how lawyers argued cases and fought for justice. But dreams like those seemed impossible when you grew up poor and black in a town where opportunities were scarce. Instead of pursuing law school, Marcus took whatever jobs he could find to help support his family. Still, he held on to his dream, even if only in secret. One fateful evening, everything changed. It was a chilly Tuesday night, and Marcus had just finished working late at the garage. On his way home, he stopped by a convenience store to grab milk for breakfast the next morning. Little did he know, this simple errand would lead to one of the darkest chapters of his life. While inside the store, a masked man burst through the door shouting threats and demanding money from the cashier. Panic spread among the customers who scrambled to leave the scene. Marcus froze for a moment, unsure what to do, before deciding to step outside to avoid getting caught in the chaos. The robbery ended quickly with the thief fleeing into the night. No one was hurt, but the police arrived within minutes, cordoning off the area and questioning witnesses. At first, Marcus thought he was safe. He hadn't done anything wrong after all. But things took a turn when one of the officers singled him out. "You, stay right there," the officer barked, pointing at Marcus. Confused, Marcus obeyed, raising his hand slightly to show he meant no harm. "Why are you stopping me?" "I'm just here to buy milk," Marcus said calmly, holding up the carton as proof. But the officer wasn't convinced. According to the initial report, someone matching Marcus's description, a tall black man wearing a hoodie, had been seen fleeing the scene. Never mind that Marcus had actually been inside the store during the robbery or that multiple witnesses confirmed seeing him there. In the eyes of the police, Marcus fit the vague profile they were looking for, and that was enough to label him a suspect. The arrest was swift and brutal. Marcus was handcuffed, shoved into the back of a squad car, and taken to the station. He tried to explain himself, telling the officers they had the wrong person, but his words fell on deaf ears. For hours he sat in a cold interrogation room, pleading his innocence while detectives grilled him with questions. Without access to a lawyer and overwhelmed by fear, Marcus felt powerless. By the end of the night, he was formally charged with armed robbery and thrown into jail to await trial. News of Marcus's arrest spread quickly around Oak Ridge. Some neighbors whispered about how shocking it was, while others shrugged it off, assuming guilt based solely on the color of his skin. Even Sarah struggled to believe her husband could be involved in such a crime. But doubt crept in as days turned into weeks. She visited him in jail whenever she could, bringing updates about their kids and promising to stand by him no matter what. Yet, the weight of uncertainty hung heavy over them both. In prison, Marcus faced a harsh reality. The days were long, the nights even longer. Surrounded by strangers, some violent and unpredictable, he learned to keep to himself. To pass the time, he began reading books from the prison library. At first, it was just fiction, anything to escape the bleakness of his surroundings. But soon, curiosity led him to pick up legal textbooks. Perhaps it was fate, or maybe it was desperation. But those dusty old volumes became Marcus's lifeline. He started slowly, flipping through pages filled with unfamiliar terms like habeas corpus and due process. Each new concept felt like solving a puzzle, challenging yet rewarding. Over time, Marcus grew more confident, devouring case studies and memorizing statutes. He studied landmark Supreme Court decisions, learning how judges interpreted laws and how defendants could challenge unfair rulings. What began as a way to occupy his mind transformed into something far greater, a mission. Marcus realized that if he wanted to clear his name, he couldn't rely on anyone else. He had to become his own advocate. Prison guards and fellow inmates often mocked him, calling him names like professor or lawyer boy. They laughed at the idea of a mechanic-turned-inmate trying to understand complex legal principles. But Marcus didn't care. He knew he was on to something important. Every hour spent studying brought him closer to freedom, closer to proving his innocence. And though the road ahead seemed impossibly steep, Marcus refused to give up. He told himself repeatedly, "If they think I'm guilty, I'll show them otherwise." Little did Marcus or anyone else know, these months spent buried in books were shaping him into something extraordinary. Behind bars, isolated from the world, a self-taught legal genius was emerging. While the system had failed him, Marcus vowed to use its own rules against it. He may have been locked away, but his mind was freer than ever. And someday, he promised himself, he would walk out of that prison not as a convict, but as a victor. This was only the beginning of Marcus's journey, a story of resilience, determination, and the unyielding pursuit of justice. Though the odds were stacked against him, Marcus carried a spark of hope within him, fueled by the belief that truth would eventually prevail. For now, he focused on learning, preparing, and waiting for the moment when he could finally fight back. 3 years had passed since Marcus Johnson's arrest, and every day behind bars felt like an eternity. Despite his best efforts to appeal his conviction using public defenders, the system seemed determined to keep him locked away. Each lawyer assigned to his case either lacked experience or showed little interest in fighting for him. Frustrated and desperate, Marcus decided it was time to take matters into his own hands. He would represent himself in court, a decision that many dismissed as foolish, even suicidal, but Marcus knew something they didn't. Over those 3 years, he had transformed from a mechanic with big dreams into a self-taught legal expert who understood the law better than most professionals. The day of the hearing finally arrived, and Marcus walked into the courtroom wearing clothes borrowed from a fellow inmate. They were slightly too large and wrinkled, but he wore them with pride. His heart raced as he took his seat at the defendant's table, clutching a stack of papers filled with notes, statutes, and case references. The room buzzed with murmurs as spectators sized him up. To them, Marcus looked like any other prisoner, disheveled, nervous, and out of place. No one suspected the depth of knowledge hidden beneath his calm exterior. Judge Richard Holloway entered the room moments later, his presence commanding immediate silence. Known for his sharp tongue and disdain toward pro se litigants, people representing themselves, Judge Holloway wasted no time making his feelings clear. As soon as Marcus stood up to address the court, the judge leaned back in his chair, raising an eyebrow skeptically. Well, Judge Holloway began, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "It seems we have a brave soul here today. Mr. Johnson, correct? You've decided to act as your own attorney?" Before Marcus could respond, the judge continued. "Do you even know what you're doing? Representing yourself is like performing surgery without training. It rarely ends well." The audience chuckled nervously at the judge's comment, but Marcus remained unfazed. He adjusted his glasses, cleared his throat, and spoke in a steady voice. "Your Honor, I may not be a licensed attorney, but I have spent countless hours studying the law. I believe I can present my case effectively and demonstrate why my conviction should be overturned." Judge Holloway smirked, clearly unimpressed. "Oh, so you've read a few books? Congratulations, that doesn't make you a lawyer." The condescending tone sent a ripple of discomfort through the room, but Marcus refused to let it shake him. Instead, he dove straight into his argument, citing specific laws and procedural errors that had occurred during his arrest and trial. He began by pointing out inconsistencies in the police report. For example, the description of the suspect varied significantly between witness statements and official records. Some witnesses claimed the robber was shorter and stockier, while others described him as taller and thinner. None mentioned tattoos or scars, yet Marcus bore several distinctive marks on his arms. These discrepancies, Marcus argued, cast serious doubt on whether he was ever truly identified as the perpetrator. Next, he addressed the issue of illegally obtained evidence. During his initial arrest, Officers searched his car without probable cause or a warrant, finding nothing incriminating. Yet this unlawful search formed part of the prosecution's case against him. Citing the Fourth Amendment, which protects citizens from unreasonable searches and seizures, Marcus explained how this violation rendered much of the evidence inadmissible. As Marcus laid out his points, the atmosphere in the courtroom shifted. Spectators exchanged surprised glances, some leaning forward to listen more closely. Even the prosecutor appeared uneasy, flipping through documents as if searching for counter-arguments. But Judge Holloway wasn't ready to concede. Every time Marcus made a compelling point, the judge interrupted with snide remarks. "Are you finished yet, Mr. Johnson?" Judge Holloway asked, after Marcus cited a precedent-setting Supreme Court ruling. "You're beginning to sound like a broken record." When Marcus calmly responded by elaborating further on the relevance of the case, the judge rolled his eyes dramatically. "Fine, go ahead," he muttered, though his irritation was evident. Despite the judge's mockery, Marcus pressed on. He brought up another crucial flaw: the failure of investigators to follow up on potential alibi witnesses. One key witness, a store employee named Clara Bennett, had told police she saw Marcus inside the convenience store during the robbery. However, her statement was ignored, buried under piles of paperwork. Marcus produced a signed affidavit from Clara, confirming his whereabouts and proving he couldn't possibly have committed the crime. By now, the tension in the room was palpable. Spectators whispered among themselves, marveling at Marcus's composure and command of legal jargon. Reporters scribbled furiously in their notebooks, sensing they were witnessing something extraordinary. Meanwhile, the prosecutor grew increasingly flustered, struggling to refute Marcus's arguments with anything substantial. At one point, the prosecutor attempted to discredit Marcus by accusing him of cherry-picking facts. "Your Honor," the prosecutor said, turning to Judge Holloway, "this man is selectively interpreting the law to suit his narrative. He's not qualified to do this." Marcus didn't miss a beat. "With all due respect," he replied, his tone firm but respectful, "I'm merely presenting evidence and citing established legal principles. If my interpretation is incorrect, I invite opposing counsel to clarify where I've gone wrong." The courtroom fell silent as everyone waited for the prosecutor's response. When none came, Judge Holloway intervened, cutting off further discussion. "Enough," the judge barked, slamming his gavel. "We'll take a recess and reconvene shortly." As the bailiff called for order, Marcus returned to his seat, his mind racing. He knew he had planted seeds of doubt in the minds of those present, but he also understood the battle was far from over. Judge Holloway's bias was evident, and there was no guarantee the court would rule in his favor. During the recess, Marcus sat alone, reviewing his notes and mentally preparing for the next round. Around him, conversations buzzed about his performance. A young woman sitting nearby leaned over and whispered, "You're amazing, I hope you win." Marcus gave her a small smile, grateful for the encouragement. Deep down, however, he knew praise wouldn't free him. Only justice could. When the session resumed, Judge Holloway resumed his dismissive attitude, questioning Marcus's credibility at every turn. Yet, Marcus continued to hold his ground, refusing to be intimidated. With each objection raised and overruled, with each statute quoted and precedent cited, Marcus proved he was more than just a mechanic turned prisoner. He was a man driven by purpose, armed with knowledge and determined to expose the truth. As the hearing drew to a close, the courtroom erupted in quiet chatter. People debated whether Marcus's arguments were strong enough to overturn his conviction. Others speculated about what Judge Holloway would decide. For Marcus, the outcome was still uncertain, but one thing was clear: he had shown the world, and himself, that he was capable of standing toe-to-toe with the very system that sought to crush him. The final verdict would come later, but for now, Marcus allowed himself a moment of quiet triumph. He had faced ridicule, mockery, and outright hostility, yet he hadn't faltered. In the face of adversity, he had risen above, proving that intelligence and determination could shine even in the darkest places. And though the fight was far from over, Marcus knew he had already won a significant victory simply by refusing to give up. The courtroom was tense as the hearing resumed after the recess. Marcus Johnson stood tall, his confidence unwavering despite Judge Holloway's repeated attempts to undermine him. The judge's disdain for Marcus had only grown more apparent, but it no longer rattled him. Instead, Marcus channeled every ounce of frustration and anger into fueling his arguments. He knew this was his moment to shine, to prove not just his innocence but also that he was far smarter than anyone in that room gave him credit for. As the proceedings continued, Marcus presented his strongest piece of evidence yet, a sworn affidavit from Clara Bennett, the store employee who had witnessed him inside the convenience store during the robbery. Clara's statement was clear and unequivocal. She saw Marcus browsing snacks near the refrigerators when the masked robber burst in. This alibi alone should have exonerated him years ago, but it had been ignored by investigators eager to close the case quickly. Marcus handed the document to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. "Your Honor," Marcus said calmly, "this affidavit confirms my whereabouts at the time of the robbery. It directly contradicts the prosecution's claim that I was involved." Judge Holloway glanced at the paper briefly, before tossing it aside with a wave of his hand. "This is hearsay," he declared dismissively. "It doesn't hold up in court." Marcus clenched his fists under the table but kept his composure. "Actually, Your Honor," he replied, his voice steady, "it's considered admissible under Rule 803-24 of the Federal Rules of Evidence, which allows exceptions for statements against interest made under oath. Furthermore, Ms. Bennett is willing to testify if called upon." The prosecutor shifted uncomfortably in his seat, clearly unprepared for Marcus's depth of knowledge. Judge Holloway, however, wasn't about to let Marcus gain the upper hand. "Enough with the theatrics, Mr. Johnson," the judge snapped. "You're wasting everyone's time." But Marcus wasn't finished. He turned to face the jury box even though there was none in this appellate hearing, and addressed the audience as though they were jurors. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his tone earnest, "the truth is simple. The police arrested me based on flimsy evidence because I fit a vague description, a black man in a hoodie. They didn't care whether I was innocent or guilty. They just wanted someone to blame. Now, 3 years later, I stand here not as a criminal but as a victim of a broken system." His words resonated deeply with many in the room. Spectators exchanged glances, some nodding in agreement while others whispered among themselves. Even the court reporter paused briefly, her fingers hovering over the keys as she listened intently. For the first time, people began to see Marcus, not as a convict fighting for freedom, but as a symbol of resilience and justice. Undeterred by Judge Holloway's interruptions, Marcus pressed forward with his final argument. He cited numerous legal precedents where similar cases had resulted in overturned convictions due to procedural errors and misconduct. One such case involved a man wrongfully imprisoned for 8 years before new evidence proved his innocence. Marcus quoted the judge's ruling verbatim, emphasizing how the court acknowledged its duty to rectify miscarriages of justice. "You see, Your Honor," Marcus concluded, his voice rising slightly with passion, "justice isn't about protecting the system, it's about protecting the people. If we allow flawed investigations and biased decisions to go unchecked, then we fail as a society. Today I ask you to do what's right. Free me so I can return to my family and rebuild my life." For a brief moment, silence enveloped the courtroom. Even Judge Holloway seemed taken aback by Marcus's eloquence and conviction. But pride, and perhaps fear of appearing wrong, kept the judge from admitting defeat. Instead, he leaned forward, glaring at Marcus. "Mr. Johnson, your impassioned speech doesn't change the fact that you were convicted by a jury of your peers. Unless you can provide irrefutable proof of your innocence, this court will uphold the original verdict." Marcus nodded slowly, unfazed by the judge's stubbornness. "Then let's talk about irrefutable proof," he said, pulling out another document. This one contained DNA test results obtained through a recent motion he filed, requesting re-examination of evidence collected at the crime scene. The tests revealed traces of skin cells found on the stolen cash register, not belonging to Marcus but matching a known felon already incarcerated for unrelated crimes. This DNA evidence proves conclusively that I wasn't present during the robbery, Marcus stated firmly, handing the report to the bailiff. It ties the real perpetrator to the scene and absolves me completely. How much clearer can it get? The prosecutor shot to his feet, visibly alarmed. Objection, Your Honor. This evidence wasn't disclosed earlier and shouldn't be admitted now. Overruled, Judge Holloway muttered reluctantly, knowing full well he couldn't ignore such damning proof. As the prosecutor sank back into his chair, defeated, Marcus allowed himself a small smile. He had done everything within his power to expose the truth, leaving no stone unturned. By the end of the hearing, the atmosphere in the courtroom had shifted dramatically. What started as skepticism toward a self-representing inmate had transformed into admiration for a man whose intellect and determination left an indelible mark. Reporters scribbled furiously in their notebooks, capturing every detail of Marcus's performance. Lawyers in attendance exchanged impressed glances, whispering about the rare brilliance they had just witnessed. Even Judge Holloway, though still reluctant to admit fault, appeared uneasy as he adjourned the session. Outside the courthouse, news cameras waited eagerly for any comment Marcus might offer. Flanked by Sarah and their children, Marcus stepped into the sunlight, blinking against the glare of flashes. When asked how he felt about the outcome, he simply smiled. "I'm hopeful," he said. "Hopeful that justice will prevail, not just for me, but for everyone who has been failed by this system. My fight isn't over yet, but today showed me that the truth always finds a way." Back inside, Judge Holloway sat alone in his chambers, staring at the pile of documents Marcus had submitted. Deep down, he knew the case against Marcus was crumbling, yet pride and protocol dictated that he couldn't simply reverse the conviction outright. Still, the image of Marcus standing confidently before him lingered, an unsettling reminder of how easily bias could blind even those entrusted with upholding justice. Days turned into weeks as Marcus awaited the court's decision. During this time, his story gained national attention. Newspapers ran headlines like "Convict turned legal prodigy fights for freedom" and "Man wrongly imprisoned becomes his own lawyer." Social media buzzed with support, with hashtags like "Free Marcus Johnson" trending nationwide. Legal experts praised his ability to navigate complex laws without formal training, calling him a modern-day hero. Meanwhile, Sarah worked tirelessly behind the scenes, organizing fundraisers and reaching out to advocacy groups. Their efforts paid off when several high-profile attorneys offered to assist Marcus pro bono, recognizing the importance of his case in challenging systemic inequalities. Though Marcus appreciated their offers, he remained determined to finish what he started. After all, this journey wasn't just about proving his innocence. It was about reclaiming his dignity and showing the world that intelligence knows no boundaries. Finally, the day of reckoning arrived. The appellate court issued its ruling, overturning Marcus's conviction based on overwhelming evidence of his innocence. The decision sent shockwaves through the legal community, prompting calls for reform and accountability. For Marcus, however, the victory was bittersweet. 3 years of his life had been stolen, leaving scars that would never fully heal. Yet, as he walked out of prison a free man, surrounded by loved ones and supporters, he felt a sense of peace. Justice may have been delayed, but it hadn't been denied. In the days that followed, Marcus became a symbol of hope for countless individuals wrongfully imprisoned across the country. His story inspired others to speak out against injustice, while his transformation from mechanic to legal genius served as a testament to the power of perseverance. Little did Marcus know, this was only the beginning of his journey, a journey that would take him from the depths of despair to the heights of triumph, forever changing the course of his life and the lives of those around him. The moment Marcus Johnson stepped out of the prison gates, a wave of emotions washed over him. The sun felt warmer than he remembered, the air fresher, and the sounds of freedom, birds chirping, cars honking, children laughing, almost surreal, after 3 years behind bars. Sarah ran to him, tears streaming down her face as she hugged him tightly. Their kids clung to his legs, giggling and shouting, "Daddy's home!" For a man who had spent countless nights wondering if he'd ever see his family again. This reunion was nothing short of miraculous. But Marcus wasn't one to dwell on emotions for too long. As much as he wanted to savor the joy of being free, he knew there was still work to be done. His exoneration was a victory, yes, but it also exposed deep flaws in the justice system that needed addressing. He couldn't just walk away and pretend that everything was fine. He owed it to himself and to others like him to fight for change. In the weeks following his release, Marcus became a household name. News outlets couldn't get enough of his story, a mechanic turned legal genius who had fought his way out of wrongful imprisonment. Interviews poured in from morning talk shows to late-night programs, each host eager to hear how Marcus managed to outsmart seasoned lawyers and expose corruption. During these appearances, Marcus spoke candidly about his struggles, sharing not only his pain but also his hope for reform. "I'm not special," he often said, deflecting praise. "I'm just someone who refused to give up. There are thousands of people sitting in prison right now, innocent like I was, waiting for someone to listen. If my story can shine a light on their plight, then maybe something good will come out of all this." His words resonated deeply with audiences across the country. People began organizing protests outside courthouses, demanding investigations into wrongful convictions. Social media campaigns gained momentum, with hashtags like Our Justice for All and Aker Fix the System trending daily. Even lawmakers took notice, introducing bills aimed at improving police accountability and ensuring fair trials for marginalized communities. Marcus's voice had sparked a movement, and he embraced his role as an advocate with humility and determination. Despite the newfound fame, Marcus remained grounded. He returned to his old neighborhood in Oak Ridge, where life carried on much as it always had. Neighbors greeted him warmly, some apologizing for doubting him during his arrest. Marcus forgave them easily. He understood how fear and prejudice could cloud judgment. What mattered most was moving forward, not dwelling on the past. One afternoon, while helping Sarah unpack boxes of belongings they had stored during his imprisonment, Marcus received a call from a prestigious law school. They had seen his interviews and were impressed by his knowledge of the law. Would he consider enrolling? At first, Marcus laughed, thinking it was a joke. But when the dean explained they were offering him a full scholarship, he realized they were serious. "Are you sure about this?" Sarah asked later that evening, her brow furrowed with concern. "You've been through so much already. Do you really want to dive back into studying?" Marcus nodded, his eyes shining with resolve. "This is what I've always dreamed of, Sarah. And now, more than ever, I feel called to do it. Imagine being able to represent people who don't have a voice, who can't fight for themselves. That's the kind of lawyer I want to be." With Sarah's support, Marcus enrolled in law school, balancing classes with raising awareness about wrongful convictions. His professors quickly recognized his talent, often praising his ability to analyze cases with precision and creativity. Classmates admired his dedication, frequently seeking his advice on complex assignments. Though the workload was grueling, Marcus thrived, finding purpose in every challenge. While pursuing his education, Marcus filed a lawsuit against the officers and officials responsible for his wrongful arrest. It wasn't about revenge, it was about accountability. He sought compensation for the years stolen from him, hoping the case would serve as a warning to others in positions of power. The lawsuit garnered national attention, further amplifying calls for reform. Legal experts weighed in, debating whether qualified immunity, the doctrine shielding government officials from lawsuits, should apply in cases like Marcus's. Public opinion leaned heavily in his favor, with many arguing that no one should be above the law. As Marcus's influence grew, so did scrutiny of Judge Richard Holloway. Recordings of the judge's condescending remarks during Marcus's hearing went viral, sparking outrage online. Viewers criticized his bias, accusing him of undermining justice rather than upholding it. Calls for an investigation into his conduct intensified, with petitions demanding his removal circulating widely. While Judge Holloway denied any wrongdoing, his reputation suffered irreparable damage. For Marcus, seeing the tables turn brought a sense of vindication, but more importantly, it highlighted the importance of holding authority figures accountable. During this time, Marcus also connected with organizations advocating for criminal justice reform. He traveled the country, speaking at conferences and rallies, sharing his story and urging action. One event, hosted by a nonprofit called Freedom for All, stood out in particular. Standing before a packed auditorium, Marcus delivered a speech that left attendees speechless. "When I was arrested, I didn't think I'd survive prison, let alone make it out alive. But here I am today, proof that resilience and faith can overcome even the darkest moments. My journey taught me something valuable, that the system isn't broken, it's rigged. It's designed to target people who look like me, who come from backgrounds like mine. And unless we dismantle it piece by piece, it will continue to destroy lives." His words earned a standing ovation, cementing his status as a leader in the fight for justice. Yet, despite the accolades, Marcus stayed humble. He reminded himself daily that his success wasn't just about personal triumph, it was about paving the way for others. Law school proved to be both rewarding and challenging. Marcus juggled coursework, advocacy work, and family responsibilities, often staying up late to finish assignments. There were days when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm him, but he pushed through, driven by the belief that his efforts would make a difference. By the end of his second year, he had already clerked for 2 prominent civil rights attorneys, gaining invaluable experience in courtroom strategy and client representation. One of his proudest achievements came during his final semester, when he represented another wrongfully imprisoned individual in a mock trial competition. The case involved a young black man accused of burglary based on shaky evidence. Drawing from his own experiences, Marcus crafted a compelling defense, exposing flaws in the prosecution's arguments and securing an acquittal. His performance earned him the Best Advocate Award, along with glowing recommendations from faculty members. Graduation day arrived faster than Marcus expected. Dressed in a cap and gown, he walked across the stage to receive his diploma, his heart swelling with pride. Sarah and the kids cheered from the audience, beaming with admiration. As Marcus shook hands with the dean, he whispered, "Thank you for believing in me." The dean smiled, replying, "We should thank you, you're going to change the world." With his law degree in hand, Marcus opened his own practice, specializing in criminal defense and civil rights litigation. His first major case involved representing a woman named Lisa Carter, who had been sentenced to 10 years in prison for a crime she didn't commit. Like Marcus, Lisa had been failed by a biased system that ignored exculpatory evidence and rushed to judgment. Determined to prevent history from repeating itself, Marcus poured his energy into her case, filing motions, gathering witnesses, and presenting oral arguments with unmatched passion. After months of hard work, the court overturned Lisa's conviction, citing prosecutorial misconduct and ineffective assistance of counsel. When the verdict was announced, Lisa broke down in tears, hugging Marcus tightly. "You saved my life," she sobbed. Marcus simply smiled, knowing exactly how she felt. Looking back on his journey, Marcus marveled at how far he'd come. From a mechanic dreaming of becoming a lawyer to a self-taught legal genius fighting for justice, his transformation was nothing short of extraordinary. Yet, he never forgot the lessons he learned along the way, that perseverance, integrity, and compassion could move mountains. And though the road ahead would always have challenges, Marcus faced them head-on, armed with the belief that truth and justice would ultimately prevail. For Marcus Johnson, redemption wasn't just about reclaiming his freedom, it was about using his second chance to create a better future for everyone. Marcus Johnson's journey from a mechanic wrongfully imprisoned to a respected lawyer and advocate for justice was nothing short of extraordinary. Yet his story didn't end with his exoneration or even the opening of his law practice. Instead, it marked the beginning of a lifelong mission, a commitment to ensure that no one else would endure the pain and injustice he had faced. For Marcus, freedom wasn't just about walking out of prison. It was about building a world where fairness triumphed over bias, where truth mattered more than prejudice. In the months following Lisa Carter's successful appeal, Marcus's reputation as a skilled and compassionate attorney grew rapidly. Word spread among marginalized communities about the man who fought like a lion for those without a voice. People began reaching out to him, sharing stories of wrongful convictions, police misconduct, and systemic failures. Each case weighed heavily on Marcus, but he welcomed the responsibility. He knew that every client he represented was another chance to expose flaws in the system and demand accountability. One particularly challenging case involved a teenager named Jamal Harris, who had been sentenced to life without parole for allegedly participating in a gang-related shooting. The evidence against Jamal was circumstantial at best. Witnesses recanted their testimonies, claiming they had been coerced by detectives eager to close the case. Worse still, Jamal's public defender barely showed up for hearings, leaving him defenseless during trial. By the time Marcus took on the case, Jamal had already spent 5 years behind bars, his dreams crushed under the weight of a broken system. Determined to give Jamal a fighting chance, Marcus threw himself into the investigation. He reviewed thousands of pages of court documents, interviewed witnesses, and filed countless motions to uncover new evidence. It was grueling work, often stretching late into the night, but Marcus refused to give up. Finally, after nearly a year of relentless effort, he discovered a crucial piece of information buried in police records: a surveillance video showing Jamal miles away from the crime scene at the time of the shooting. Armed with this evidence, Marcus presented his argument to an appellate court, which overturned Jamal's conviction. The day Jamal walked out of prison, Marcus was there to greet him. The young man fell to his knees, overwhelmed by emotion, while Marcus placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You're free now," Marcus said softly. "But remember, your fight isn't over. Use this second chance to build the life you deserve." Jamal nodded, tears streaming down his face, promising to turn his life around. Watching moments like these reaffirmed Marcus's belief that justice wasn't just about winning cases, it was about restoring hope. As his practice flourished, Marcus expanded his focus beyond individual cases to tackle systemic issues head-on. He partnered with advocacy groups to push for legislative changes, such as ending cash bail, reforming sentencing guidelines, and requiring independent investigations into allegations of police misconduct. His testimony before Congress drew national attention, with lawmakers praising his insights and calling him a beacon of hope for criminal justice reform. Yet, Marcus never sought recognition for himself. He understood that real change came not from individual efforts, but from collective action. Despite his success, Marcus remained deeply connected to his roots. Every weekend he returned to Oak Ridge, visiting local schools and community centers to mentor young people. He spoke candidly about his own struggles, encouraging students to pursue their dreams regardless of obstacles. "Life will knock you down," he told them during one session, "but it's not about how many times you fall, it's about how many times you get back up." His words resonated with teenagers like Keisha, a high school senior determined to become a lawyer despite coming from a low-income family. Inspired by Marcus's story, she applied to several universities, eventually earning a full scholarship to study political science. Years later, when Keisha graduated from law school, Marcus stood proudly beside her at the ceremony, reminding her of the power she held to make a difference. Marcus's impact extended beyond his legal work and community outreach. He also found healing in unexpected ways, reconnecting with parts of himself he thought were lost forever. On weekends, he returned to his old garage, tinkering with cars alongside his brother-in-law. The smell of oil and grease brought back memories of simpler times, grounding him amidst the chaos of his new life. Sarah often teased him, saying he was still a mechanic at heart, but Marcus didn't mind. To him, fixing cars was a reminder that even broken things could be repaired, with patience, care, and determination. Family remained at the center of Marcus's life. Though the years in prison had strained his relationship with Sarah, their bond only grew stronger as they rebuilt their lives together. They celebrated milestones they once feared they'd miss: their children's graduations, birthdays, and holidays. Marcus cherished these moments knowing how fragile life could be. He often told Sarah, "We've been given a second chance. Let's make the most of it." By the time Marcus turned 45, he had achieved what many thought impossible. His name appeared in textbooks cited as an example of resilience and brilliance. Law students studied his arguments, aspiring to emulate his dedication and skill. Yet Marcus never let fame go to his head. He stayed true to the values that guided him through his darkest days: integrity, humility, and compassion. One evening, as Marcus sat on the porch of his modest home, watching the sunset with Sarah by his side, he reflected on his journey. From the moment he was arrested to the courtroom battles, the media attention, and the reforms he helped inspire, every step had shaped him into the person he was today. He realized that his hardships weren't just trials to endure. They were lessons meant to prepare him for something greater. "Do you ever wonder what life would have been like if none of this had happened?" Sarah asked quietly, breaking the silence. Marcus smiled, gazing at the horizon painted in hues of orange and pink. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but then I think about all the people we've helped, the lives we've touched. If I hadn't gone through everything I did, I wouldn't be here now, fighting for justice, raising our kids, loving you. Maybe some things happen for a reason." Sarah leaned her head on his shoulder, content in the knowledge that they had built a life filled with purpose and love. For Marcus, redemption wasn't just about reclaiming his freedom or rebuilding his career. It was about finding meaning in his suffering and using it to create a better future. Every client he defended, every speech he delivered, every child he inspired was a testament to the strength of the human spirit. Years later, when Marcus retired, he wrote a memoir titled "From Chains to Change: My Fight for Justice." In it, he shared not only his story but also the stories of those he had represented, the Jamals, Lisas, and Keishas, whose voices had been silenced until Marcus amplified them. The book became a bestseller, sparking conversations about race, inequality, and reform across the globe. Critics hailed it as a masterpiece, but for Marcus, its greatest achievement was inspiring others to believe in themselves and their ability to effect change. On the day Marcus received an honorary doctorate from the university where he once dreamed of studying law, he stood before a packed auditorium, humbled by the applause. As he delivered his acceptance speech, he looked out at the sea of faces, young and old, rich and poor, black and white, and felt a surge of gratitude. "To anyone listening," he began, his voice steady yet filled with emotion, "know this. No matter where you come from or what challenges you face, you have the power to rise above. You have the power to rewrite your story, to turn pain into purpose, and to use your voice to uplift others. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." When the ceremony ended, Marcus lingered outside, greeting well-wishers and signing copies of his book. Among the crowd was a young boy, no older than 10, clutching a worn copy of From Chains to Change. His wide eyes shone with admiration as he approached Marcus. "Mr. Johnson," the boy said shyly, "I want to be just like you when I grow up." Marcus knelt down, meeting the boy's gaze. "You can be," he replied with a warm smile. "And maybe one day, you'll inspire someone else to dream bigger than they ever thought possible." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden light over the campus, Marcus felt a profound sense of peace. His journey had been long and difficult, marked by moments of despair and triumph alike, but through it all he had remained steadfast in his pursuit of justice, proving that even the smallest spark could ignite a fire capable of lighting the way for generations to come. For Marcus Johnson, the fight for justice was far from over. But as he walked away from the podium that evening, surrounded by loved ones and supporters, he knew one thing for certain. He had made a difference, and that was enough.